We are involved in many research projects on cardiovascular disease, and in our studies we keep focusing on factors responsible for an increase in cardiovascular risk. One of these factors is certainly stress, and also lifestyle in different situations. So we try to see whether there is any possibility to identify the key factors responsible for an increase in cardiovascular risk, and then try to derive from these indications to help our patients. We focus in many previous studies on the importance of daily life stress and also on the importance of diet and in general physical activity and lifestyle. So we came up with the idea that it would be important to focus on a specific population living in a situation where daily life is more organized, more regular, where daily life stress is quite reduced as compared to the lay world. So we focus on the possibility of study what happens in monks living in a specific place such as Mount Athos. Life in Mount Athos is quite different from the life in a daily life situation in the regular living conditions. So we decided to see whether we may learn something on these conditions that might help us identifying useful suggestions to improve the daily life in our patients. So we started considering this project in cooperation with a French group led by Professor Benetos in Nancy and Professor Zampoulis in Thessaloniki in Greece. And we came up together with the idea of combining our efforts, joining our technological devices to collect data from monks living here. The idea is to quantify as carefully as possible the behavior of blood pressure in daily life, for which we are doing ambulatory blood pressure monitoring for 24 hours, because we want to pick up what are the changes in pressure when you live a regular life in a monastery. Because the information we have is different from the blood pressure measured in the office. Yes. So in the office you are seated in front of a doctor, it's not your life. Yes. This is your life. We combine this with information on the cardiac performance using cardiac ultrasounds, and also on the state of the arteries, measuring both the thickness of the arterial walls, the presence of atherosclerotic plaques, and the pulse wave velocity, which is an indicator of the stiffness of the large arteries. When you work, you move around, the pressure is supposed to go up. And we check all these variations, because that might affect the cardiac function and the arteries. So we put things together in the report, the blood pressure, the ultrasound you did already, also the blood test, and then we'll give it to you, so you have your own report to be considered. This is done also in combination with the general physical examination, taking the history as well, collecting blood samples for assessing the regular cardiovascular risk factors such as cholesterol, glucose, changes in inflammatory markers, and in general renal function. And we combine this with some specific tests on what is defined arterial aging.
3 o'clock.
Okay, in the afternoon. Okay, just to know, maybe we can see some blood pressure change so we can know. Okay, great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And we send back here the results so you can have them later. Okay, thank you. So you want to put all this information together and come up with the classification of the risk profile, which is typical of monks living for many years in a monastery. And Mount Athos is a unique opportunity in the world, because having many monks living in the same situation, quite apart from the daily life in the lay world. And our idea is to compare these parameters with parameters we can derive in a control population living nearby, so in the same environmental condition but outside the monastery, so living a lay life, a regular life in a city, and see whether we can identify specific differences in the parameters we are measuring. We think this is a unique opportunity to get information useful for science and for a better care of our patients, but also might be useful to monks living here, because we can provide them with a full, detailed cardiovascular checkup, which might help them. Our aim is to provide a detailed comparison between the cardiovascular risk profile of monks living in this specific situation with the cardiovascular risk of lay people living in a big city or a small village, but anyway outside the life of a monastery. And the idea is to derive from this suggestion for a better care of our patients, but also to provide monks with a detailed assessment of their cardiovascular risk situation, which have never been investigated in depth until now. And so we can provide useful information to both the patient living a regular lay world life and also monks living in a monastery. We might need to get more deeper into this, so this is probably the first step only. Then we want to analyze this data and come up maybe with a possible proposal for an in-depth assessment of some specific parameters which might be different. Our preliminary observations seem to indicate, for example, that the artery seems to be less stiff in monks living here, which might reflect, probably, but we have to go into this more carefully, a different situation of risk for atherosclerosis, which is the big issue we are fighting in our patients every day. We decided to come to Mount Athos for a number of reasons. First, because we have here a concentration of monks living in a secluded manner out of the lay world, and they've been doing this for years. And it's not easy to find a large number of monks in this situation in other monasteries. Of course, we have many monasteries around, but usually there we can find only smaller amounts of monks available. So we need numbers for a scientific evaluation, also for the statistical analysis, and we need something as big as what is there in Mount Athos and mainly in this monastery. Second is a unique geographical situation, because these monks are really secluded in their daily life outside the common stress of the lay world. Most of the other monasteries are just included, although separated, in the context of a big city or just in a countryside, but very close to the near life stress. So we really want to find a possibility to separate what are the environmental characteristics of the people we are investigating. So that's why Mount Athos might be a unique opportunity for that. Our aim is also to publish this data in international scientific journals to make the information available to all scientists all over the world. Of course, we are also sending this information back to the monks here. We want to provide a service to them. So all the results from our analysis will be summarized and sent back here for giving the monks living here the necessary clinical information for a better health. So all what we are analyzing will be also available here for a daily care. So doctors living and working here might help the monks also based on the data we have been collecting.